I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so excited today to be talking about HBO Max's The Garcias. We are joined today by creator, showrunner, and executive producer Jeff Valdez, as well as actors reprising their characters from the original, Jeffrey Licon and Bobby Gonzalez. And Jeff, I wanted to start by talking about your journey into rebooting the show, because you had been working to get the rights back from the series for several years. So this isn't something that just came about in the last couple of years. It sounds like this has been kind of over a decade in the works almost. And with the fact that it took several years to get to this point of rebooting, were there different ways in which you started to think about where these characters would be along the way? Because obviously 5 years ago, maybe they would have been in a different place to where they are now when you finally got the opportunity to recreate it and to revisit them.
Yeah, the length of time it took to get the show. I told somebody today, I said, "Do you realize I could have gotten a doctorate in that amount of time?" Granted, it wasn't every day I was doing it like you would for a doctor, but 10 years is a long time. 7 years of begging and screaming, and then 3 years of getting it sold and making it. And all along I was always thinking about where would they evolve to. But what really happened is once I got the rights back from Viacom, then I people within my inner circle in the company, several people said, "No, you should just recast George and and Carlos and Lorena, the kids, just get new kids." Right. And I'm still upset about when they changed Darren on Bewitched, and I'm still bothered by the new Batman. I like the old Batman before. And so I was like, that doesn't feel right. So we went on YouTube, where our show, the original Brothers Garcia, is pirated. And I started talking to the fans on the pirated shows, which I probably shouldn't have done, but they were helpful. I said, "What do you want? Do you want to see new kids, or do you want to see the original kids growing up?" And it was overwhelming. I think there was one person said, "Get new kids," and 99.99% said, "Well, let's see what happened to them. How did they grow?" And then I really, once I got that, the idea was changing the dynamic. As Hollywood makes content that looks for an audience, I looked for the audience and said, "What is it you want?" Right. And so this really was made for them. And that helped shape who all the characters were, because everybody wanted to know, Larry, did he become an astronaut? What happened with George's tech? Did Carlos's ego get the best of him? Those are all things that people wanted. Did Lorena become a novella star? Right. And that was the fun part of doing it. And sorry, my computer just dinged and I didn't know how to turn it off. So
I love hearing the genesis of that, and kind of leads me into, for you, Jeffrey and Bobby, it's such an amazing opportunity as actors to get to come back to a character after this much time has passed. And so it's very different to developing a character from scratch. You have that history, but again, there's so much space and time to bridge and fill in. So when you first got Jeff's scripts and the ideation of where they were at in life, what was the entry point in terms of character redevelopment almost for both of you?
Well, I was going to say, even before that process happened, it was really cool to get those phone calls from Jeff Valdez, throughout that 7 to 10 year process. And, our lives as, Carlos and George Garcia were changing, almost every conversation that we were having with him on the phone too. At one point I wasn't married. At one point I was married. I only had one kid. Now I have two, you know what I mean? So that creative process was going on for sure inside Jeff Valdez's head, the whole time. But now that we had, a solid foundation as far as where our characters were in this new show, we just started connecting the dots. And honestly, the characters Carlos that I play, Carlos Garcia, he's so much of me. I was 14 when I started playing him, and almost 18 when I stopped. So those are very critical, important years of your, growing up period. And it came very, very naturally and easily for me. But what about you, Bobby?
Well, I first want to say I had no idea that my job was held in the balance of YouTube comments before today. So very grateful to all those people on YouTube for telling you to keep the same cast, Jeff. I feel similarly to Jeffrey in some ways, as far as the character was very similar to me. I feel like when I was a kid, And coming back to it, I think what was different that I needed to figure out were the relationships, specifically with my wife and daughter, because I'm not married, nor have I ever been married, and I don't think I have any kids. So
Same.
I had to, yeah, I had to figure out what that was like. And I mean, luckily, the amazing Nitya Chama and Maeve Garai are such amazing actors that are willing to collaborate and play and learn. And so I kind of, speaking to Nitya, I just want to support her in everything that she does and help her out with anything that she's doing. And I was like, maybe that's what being a husband's like. I don't know, but this is something at least I can latch on to and work with. And with Maeve, as soon as I met her, and she's just this bundle of talent that is just trying to learn everything that she can. And she wanted to learn about comedy, so she'd come up to me and we'd try and work on bits and stuff. And I got very protective of her. And I was like, okay, maybe that's what it feels like to be a father. I don't know, but I can latch onto this and work with it. And that's how I started to work on the character and develop it to where George is now.
So I watch them on the set. I have eyes on everything, and they really were like dads on the set. I mean, they would be holding hands with their wives when they weren't on camera. I mean, it was so adorable to see just that connectivity. Like when we get together at the house for pizza wine parties, we do often, and and there really is a real family that's been built here. It's not just a show. And as I told everybody, it's like I always like to think of it as like a turkey at Thanksgiving. We bake this turkey and we can't just keep it to ourselves anymore. We got to put it on the table, and it's no longer our turkey. It's now for everybody to enjoy.
I mean, sorry.
I love turkey. Just wanted to.
Maybe turkey's a bad word. Maybe the ham or a Chateaubriand, something like that.
I don't know what that last one is, but it sounds delicious.
I mean, and in talking about the new cast members as well, it's an interesting space for them as well to come into a show with the fact that you've already lived with these characters, that, you have kind of a shorthand and a dynamic with one another that was pre-existing as well. And so for all three of you, what were the things that you felt were the most important to share with the new cast members, to share with crew members who were coming into working on the show on the first time, in terms of not just about what the show was, but what it was going to be and what that dynamic and creative process tends to be amongst everybody in the way that you approach making the series?
Now, mine was tell your agents to calm down. So go ahead, Bobby and Jeffrey.
You didn't have to tell my agent to calm down since I didn't have one.
Have an agent.
I don't have one. It's great. I got to keep all of my money. What actor can say that? I think I touched on it a little bit, but as far as Maeve wanted to, again, very talented little actor. She just thought of this she just thought of this herself. She wanted to take aspects of Nitya, who plays Anna, my wife, and aspects of me, and she wanted to put it together. And she's like, okay, that's who Victoria is. So for me, she came and she was like, okay, you're really goofy. You're like an idiot. Like, show me how to do more of that. And as we kept filming, she added like more and more of it, and until that, like when it fit the character, when it fit the plot, that I could see myself in some of her like bits, and like the way that she like did some of her jokes. It was kind of surreal. I guess it's the way the parents feel. And with Nitya and I think what was something that we really just worked on was she spends a lot of the season telling me I'm not Mexican, and we're kind of not at odds, but she's being brutally honest for a lot of the season. So we wanted to make sure that there was still a lot of love there, because there is love in our family. And I think that's what we worked on the most. She knows that I'm going to be a goofball, and so she needs to put me right, but with love. Even if it sounds mean, there's still love.
Yeah, and I know I think you guys were talking about the audition process before I got in this room in the Zoom call, but I think that helped tremendously as far as just, kicking things off with a little bit of chemistry and a little bit of, just reading with each other. I've never been a part of a process like that. And I genuinely think that it was one of the biggest, helpers as far as like getting everything off on the right foot,
Yeah,
And
and by the way, in the audition process, my son who's graduating from Notre Dame May 15th, which actually Jeffrey and Vanessa used to babysit him on the original Garcias, and now he's graduating from Notre Dame.
It's crazy.
And, he reminded me that there were a couple of characters. There for sure, maybe he pushed really hard for Maeve. He said, "You need someone," and he convinced me too. At the end of the day, when I had to make the decision, it was between her and another person. Oh, between Maeve and Oliver, those two characters, because there was a kid that was very bigger, Oliver, really animated kind of kid, and he said, "No, he's too big. You got to ground him more." Somebody like Oliver. And Maeve, she has to be able to stand up to Nitsia because Nitsia is very strong. And he said Maeve's the only person that could stand up to her, and that weighed into the decision too. So anybody who tells you that there aren't people all the way through the process behind the scenes helping in a decision. And one of the last things I will say too is one of the things I told the casting director Blanca, who did an amazing job. After a while, when we were first auditioning, I said, "I don't want to see anybody's resumes. I can't buy a resume," because what happens is Hollywood, part of the reason we don't have diversity here is you buy resumes. You're in a hurry. You got to get stuff done quick. So you just look at the resume. And part of the problem is when you got a young person coming in to read for a role and their only experience is gang member number 3, gang member number 5, gang member number 14, it's an unfair disadvantage to them coming into the room to audition. So I would just say, let's make a decision based on their talent right here and now.
And in talking about the audition process a little bit more, Jeff, you've spoken about how you actually really loved doing it all virtually and doing it over Zoom, because it's that idea of you're seeing someone on screen and you're seeing how they will read on camera in a different way that you do in the room. And what was kind of the turning point for you where you actually realized that was a really beneficial scenario and a way to be casting for the reboot?
When I could just know that I'm sitting in a pair of shorts with my coffee on my side. I'm like, well, this is so much easier than sitting in a room going back and forth. Although one great thing about in the original Brothers Garcia, Maureen McCormick, who played Marcia Brady, in the live process, there was a scene where she had to kiss her husband. In the scene, I was reading across from her, and she kissed me. So, Marcia Brady. So that part, it was kind of one of those bragging rights things. But no, when it became apparent to me about the casting was just when I could pull the cast into it. When I could just make a call and say, "Hey, we've got so and so." And then the other great thing is that we pranked everybody when we knew who was getting the role, and we said, "Oh, well, it didn't record. Can you come back and read the scene one more time?" And I think that was like such a magic moment, because then you get so many people don't know what it's like for an actor to go through audition after audition and call back and then to see that they actually got it. Their faces were precious.
And Bobby and Jeffrey, at that point as well, you also got the opportunity to do chemistry reads with the new cast members, with the cast that were coming in to play your family members, especially. And it sounds like some of that was reading off the script, but also that some of it was ad-libbing and really kind of playing around with the dynamic. And how did that really help when it came to shooting your first scenes together as families with this extensive history, given that you'd already had a little bit of a dynamic of playing around with scenes, emotional beats and moments, just to really kind of feel out how everybody was going to work and how they were going to approach their characters even before you started shooting?
Bobby?
Okay, yeah. I still remember very vividly when we were doing the chemistry reads and when Nitsia came into the room, and we had read with several talented women. They were all amazing comedians, all amazing actors. And then Nitsia came in and I was no longer acting out the scene. I was just reacting to everything that she was doing. And she was giving me the runaround and took complete control of the scene. And it was done, and she left the room and we were happy. And I remember I looked at Jeff, I'm like, "So it's her, right?" Because that was so different. And I never really understood what the it factor was. And I think it is one of those things where you just kind of have to see it. And with Nitsia, that's just kind of what happened. I mean, we had a whole bunch of people that came in and it was like, "Okay, good." And then Nitsia came and it's like, "Well, this was completely different." And so when Nitsia and I met in person, I think it was just, honestly, it just took a conversation. It just took a conversation for us to really just talk about, where our characters were at, keep going back to that thing of just making sure that the love is always there. And we ran through the scene and I again, she just took complete control of that every single time. And then I remember Jeff Valdez specifically told me, he's like, look, Bobby, I know with your comedy, you always want to go high and you're always going to want to be at a 10 or whatever. I'm paraphrasing, Jeff. I'm sorry. I'm sure
I remember that conversation now. So because Bobby has a tendency to go big and Nitzia goes very big. And I said, you can't go with her. You're going to be tempted to. I said, you got to be the guy holding the kite down, right? You can't let her fly up in the air, man, because she's going to go. And my mission with her over the course of the time will get that, that she lands it. It's got to be grounded, but you've got to stay really grounded in your character, because if you go with her, the scene's going to spiral out of control. Yeah. And he took that advice, and it made the dynamic, the chemistry of the two of them really, really work.
The thing that I think Elsha Kim and I decided on early, especially having, two kids, was focusing on them for the first week that we got to Mexico, because we didn't really have a lot going on other than like maybe some fittings and some table reads and stuff like that. So we would, just make it a point to, hang out with them, go eat with them, go to the pool with them, go just spend as much time with them as possible, basically. And it was great just because we were inside this little bubble, like in Mexico. So, the setting couldn't have been more perfect for us to, build those relationships like right off the bat. And yeah, we just got super, super lucky, super fortunate with the actors, all of them that we got. As far as like the new cast goes, they're just incredible.
And Jeff, one of the things I actually wanted to ask you about in terms of the writing of the show is, now that the family has expanded even further and you have all these characters, just looking at the poster behind you, that's a lot of characters to write for episode to episode. And obviously each episode, there's different characters that are a little bit more at the foreground, depending on the narrative, but yet you're still always servicing every single character within the episode. And I was interested in hearing a little bit about structurally how you approach that in writing the scripts and making sure that you're always giving each character space within these episodes.
Well, first of all, when I started, this should be the Bible of this show should be an architectural digest, because it really was a lot of architecture that had to happen leading up to this. Because here I'm sitting there going, I've got 13 characters. How do I service all of them? And also I want to be, what happens too often in a half-hour show, the kids are just props in the background. And I wanted them to have real meaningful stories. So arcing out 13 characters was really a challenge. And so when I wrote that out in the Bible, and then the writers in the writers room just carried it to, yet another level. They did an outstanding job. Joy Gutierrez, who was our head writer, and the rest of the crew, they were absolutely fantastic. And it was, when you see all the episodes, there's literally everybody's got their moment to shine. And they, and the conflict between the brothers, that hasn't even started yet. You're going to see in an episode a conflict that breaks out, just to tease it a little bit. Again, it was just really, really challenging. And on top of that, I have 5 Easter eggs in the show. So stealing a book from Norman Lear's playbook, a page from Norman Lear's playbook, we have 5 different shows within the show. So now if you go onto the newcadenceproductions.com, you'll see on the sizzle reel all the new shows that we're taking out that are spinoffs of it. I don't know spinoffs, but they were embedded in the show. So when we go pitch, we've got a sizzle reel that was shot in 4K with real acting and well lit, as opposed to going, hey, here's an idea for a show about Connor Rascon. Like Connor Rascon is really going to be, this despicable news guy, kind of a Ron Burgundy. And then Surviving Paradise, which is in episode 9. We've got probably a 10-minute sizzle reel of that, but it's part of an episode. So that, adding to the architecture, we added in all these Easter eggs, and very proud of all that structural thinking in advance. And by the way, and we wrote this in a record amount of time. We cast it in a record amount of time. When I say we were flying without a net, would be the understatement of my life, because the actors, most of them the originals hadn't acted in 17 years, and then the new ones had never been in a half-hour show. The writers, some of them hadn't written on a half-hour show in 17 years. Some of them had never written on a show. The directors, almost except one, I hadn't directed in 17 years. I mean, everybody all went off to do other things. And then we came back and I realized, you know what? when people are passionate and they have, and you have a clear mission, everybody was on the same mission. So, so it works because we were all on the same mission. It wasn't a bunch of people with different agendas. And you can see that, I believe, in the show.
Absolutely. And with the fact that Jeff was bringing up conflict between the brothers, Bobby and Jeffrey, I wanted to talk a little bit about conflict between the brothers, because obviously that was part of the original show, but the stakes were very different, because when you're a teenager, the stakes feel very high, but they're not necessarily very high in actuality. Yeah. Whereas now that they're adults, the stakes are very different. They are actually high. Having the two of them look at going into business together, that's really high stakes for both of them. And so there's a lot of different emotions that come to the surface for them. And so how did you approach this new space of figuring out how that conflict would play out between them as brothers when it does exist, particularly as they go into a business relationship as well as a familial relationship in the series?
Yeah, I mean, I think throughout the 10 episodes, we do have, smaller conflicts that are fun, and we can goof around kind of with them. But the obvious, like, bigger ones when it comes to the company that George has started, and that Carlos works for and whatnot. And I mean, we have families now. We have to think about providing for these families and making a livelihood out of these this company that he has started. So the stakes are higher, and I feel like things are appropriately serious, like when they need to be, and I think the two characters, I mean, on and off screen, we really do care about each other and love each other, and no matter what, if he was going through something, I would have his back. And I just think that the brothers on the show are extremely similar. And no matter what, I mean, we can get on each other's nerves sometimes, but at the end of the day, I mean, I love him. And I think that it translates.
I think similar to the original series, all the conflicts that we would have between, the brothers or with Lorena, they were always opportunities for growth. Our characters were never stagnant. We were always growing in some way because we're making mistakes that we needed to learn from. And I think with our characters, I'm just going to speak for George for a second. George being older and having grown a lot, I think he's gotten a little hard-headed, that he doesn't believe in growth as much in his brother. And I think that is what's causing a lot of problems throughout the series. And I mean, the way I approached it is, I have done so much to get to where I am. I'm right until you can prove to me that I'm wrong. And it's and I mean, and then there's plenty of opportunities for it. Even in the first 3 episodes that have already come out, my wife lays me out several times, and even a 10-year-old kid shows me how I'm wrong. And when I'm wrong, I will admit that I'm wrong, but it's got to be proven. It's kind of funny, having watched the episodes with my mom. She keeps taking Carlos's side in everything, and I'm like, no, mom, he wasn't at the meeting. And he's like, I know, but did you have to be like that with him? I'm like, yes, he wasn't at the meeting. Like, of course. How am I supposed to trust him? She's like, ay, pobrecito. And that's just, yeah.
His mother does love me, though.
She really does.
By the way, one of the things I will tell you, Mara, Bobby had been writing and submitting scripts before we ever even went to do the show, and he wanted to be in the writer's room, and I applaud that. I was a very, very great thing that he was doing. But I told him, I said, Bobby, I want you to do something. I want you to focus only on the acting, because you could probably do both, but I think you need to do one of. It's been a while since you've never been in a writer's room, and the acting, it's been a few years. So if you focus on the acting, you're going to score. And he focused on the acting and he scored. So, I'm glad that he's doing that. So, season 2, maybe season 3, we'll start easing him towards the writers.
What was that? I think it cut out a little bit.
We need somebody to get coffee for us. So.
I mean, Jeff, also in terms of the writing of the conflict, it comes from a lot of different spaces as well for you in that regard. And even then you have the ability to play around intergenerationally in a different way. It's like we have a grandfather learning a lesson from one of his grandkids, and there's conflict in different spaces and different stakes in different ways amongst all of the ensemble dynamic. And so has that felt very similar to the way that you were writing on the Brothers Garcia, or has it felt a little bit different in how you're shaping it this time around?
Well, in the original Brothers Garcia, a lot of the characters and stories, quite frankly, came from my original family that I grew up with. And a lot of the stuff now, my wife, when we were watching the premiere, she leaned over to me. She goes, "Oh my God, I feel like I'm watching our life play out on the screen." Because like the birthday thing, that's what we do in the Valdez house. Every time it's your birthday, you get balloons and a cake, and we do mordida, and a lot of the things are really from our own personal life. And I have two sons, and I've seen the conflict between the two of them. So a lot of those stories really come internally here. And although I have to say, you should ask Jeffrey and Bobby about their day inside of a cenote. That was an interesting day for them. Have you seen that scene yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, they spent many hours it was brutal heat, and they were shooting the scene when they were dumped in the cenote. And by the way, that in that scene, we have a thing called the AHA Comedy Festival, and the point of it was to create a farm team to feed all the different things we want to do. And 5 comics from the original AHA Festival are now actors in the Garcias. One of them, Vanessa Gonzalez, who played Mending Fences, the abrasive character Sid, and Sid's son, or Sid's partner, Kit. I named him after 2 very dear friends of mine. Our name's Sid Bernard and Kit Foster Bernard. And Charlie is Kit's big brother. And Charlie Foster, his mother, is a famous Oscar-winning actress. And so it was Charlie's first acting job on a show. So he said, "I don't want my mom to give me my first job. I want you to give it to me, or I want anybody other than her." And I called him. I said, "I want to be the one that gives you your first acting job." So, and he did a great job. But Bobby and Jeffrey had all day in a cenote.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I can speak for Jeffrey here that the worst part wasn't filming. The worst part was the smell in our dressing rooms after we took a shower when we got back. I don't think we smelled it when we were there, but I think Vanessa walked into the room while we were just having lunch, and we're exhausted, and we're just like, I don't even know what we're eating, and we're just spooning it into our mouths, and she's like, "You guys can't eat in here. It smells terrible." And you're like, "Just leave us alone. It's fine. We're used to it."
I just never realized like how much like upper just strength it took just to stay still in water. Like you can't it's impossible actually.
And we built a platform on the bottom of the cenote, so they didn't have to just swim the whole time, so they could stand up in between takes. But
we couldn't use it during the filming, so we try to keep ourselves above water while we're filming.
We had a
and acting at the same time.
Right.
We had a scuba diver under the water at all times. A whole safety team. Although it was pretty shallow cenote, but we had to take all the precautions.
I think the hug was the hardest part. Having to hug while keeping our heads above water, I think, was the most difficult.
Yeah,
because it's an emotional part too, and like him and I are like crying and trying to hug each other, but we can't. It turned out looking good though. I was so worried. Yeah, I was so worried for that scene.
They referenced Principal Fender in that, and Principal Fender in the original Brothers Garcia was played by George Lopez. Vanessa Hudgens played a character in the show. Back then he was Little Bow Wow. Was on the show.
Penn Badgley.
Penn Badgley. Mary Kay Hutchinson, I think was her name.
Brenda Song.
Brenda Song. I mean, there was a lot of people started early in their careers on the Brothers Garcia.
It's amazing. Well, it's been so wonderful to hear all of these details from filming the show, and congratulations on everything with season 1. Hopefully there's a season 2 and season 3 for Bobby to get into the writer's room. And want to thank the 3 of you for sharing all of this and your time today. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you. Appreciate it.